Always go to places that others are not looking and pick the path of most discomfort. And it was in 5th grade, and I told my parents, I'm going to go to boarding school in India. So I sent myself to a military boarding school in 6th grade. That experience made me grow, learn, built an insane amount of discipline that kind of formed how I wanted to live my entire life. Fast forward a couple of years later, I was in college. I was studying computer science at Columbia. Most of my friends were like, we want to be engineers at Google, Facebook, and all these different companies. I wanted to work on an industry that the rest of Silicon Valley was overlooking, which is how I decided to go to freight and logistics. And I also thought that this is going to be a tough business to build. It's going to be extremely difficult. I've always embraced discomfort, which helps me a lot in this job. I've always looked at places that people don't want to go, which actually turns out to be really good ingredients for being a CEO, because every single day is uncomfortable. Every single quarter is something new. So I think that's what has really set me up well for this job. So my grandparents actually run a food distribution company where growing up as a kid, I saw how they got all these products over to various restaurants, and it was a super manual and efficient process. So I always knew from a very young age that I wanted to build digital products for the real world. I wanted to kind of support businesses like theirs. That was pretty clear to me. And the way this conviction in logistics just grew was I was the founding forward deployed engineer at a company called Retool. We basically helped enterprises with automating a lot of their workflows. And I was designated to be the person who led their supply chain and logistics vertical. So I was working with people like AB InBev, ShipUp, Flexport. And in the process, saw how inefficient a lot of things in logistics were, right? Like everything from how do people have visibility into their shipments? How do they generate quote requests? How do they get data into their systems? How do they manage communication with their customers? And that really opened my eyes up to seeing that some of the corporations some of the leading corporations that had some of the best tech still run super inefficiently. And I saw that was like, there's probably an opportunity to build something here that drives a lot of value. And when I decided to take the leap was I visited our first customer's office. The owner of the company was working on a Sunday evening, and he had like 100 pieces of paper stacked up on his desk. And he would take each one of these BOLs, type it manually into his TMS. And he was complaining to me at the time about how he's a big football fan and he wants to watch, the 49ers in the playoffs, and he couldn't do it because he has to type in data every weekend. And I was like, this is based on everything I've seen from my grandparents' experience, my experience at Retool, talking to you. There's so much inefficiency in logistics. And if I don't solve this problem, I'm not convinced anyone else would. So that's when I decided to take the leap, just based on all those experiences I had in my life, that this was obviously an important industry. There was clearly not a lot of great tech talent going into it. And I had a lot of conviction that we could build a big, massive business if we went after this problem.
A flip phone, a fax machine, and a pager walk into a bar. The bartender says, "What is this, a museum?" Technology moves fast. What was cutting edge 20 years ago is now more nostalgia than necessity. Sure, a flip phone can still make calls just fine, and a fax machine technically works okay. But why settle for fine when you can have better? If your back office technology still relies on email inboxes and manual workflows, it's time for an upgrade courtesy of ePay Manager powered by OTR Solutions. With ePay Manager, you can modernize your processes, streamline invoice audits, and automate payments with proactive workflows that don't rely on those email inboxes. The result? Faster invoicing, stronger security, and 50% lower back office costs. Don't let your business get stuck in the past like that pager you stopped carrying in 1999. Visit epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to bring your back office into the modern age.
Did you see when you started exploring, are there solutions to this problem today? Clearly you had to have seen that enough customers not using any solutions that might have already existed, because I've definitely heard of, for example, it's more of a feature maybe for you guys, but like document scanning and OCR kind of automating the document filing process. Did you see that there was just so many customers still to be left up for grabs that kind of gave you that additional conviction?
So I think, first of all, I think the technology wasn't quite there in prior iterations to automate these processes, because the challenge with why customers don't use OCR is that with OCR, you have to map every single field on a document to a specific field in your TMS. And it's a super manual process to get started. if a document format changes, if you had a new customer, there's a lot of configuration work, and the accuracy of it just wasn't high enough to move the needle for our customers. So the first viewpoint I had was like the technology before just didn't exist to solve their problem, right? Versus now with modern AI-driven doc extraction, you're like sort of telling your agent that look for a bill of lading number. It could be labeled as B-L, B-O-L, B.OL, and find it. And it works in a way that's document agnostic. That wasn't possible in prior iterations. The second thing I felt was most of these tech vendors building for this industry or like solving these problems were not people with supply chain backgrounds. What that meant was because they didn't work on a freight forwarder, didn't work on a 3PL, and our team, 30 to 40% of our team has worked at these companies, we just understood the hardest part about implementing these things was change management. So the approach we take is much more of like an augmented AI approach where you are a logistics provider, you outsource a workflow to us, like let's call it data entry or quoting. And then let's say you outsource your data entry workflow over to us. What we do is we deploy our agents. They go and they automate your entire extraction process, run credit checks, check if it has all the required fields, go and update your McCloud or your Revenova TMS. And if there's an error, we also offer a human QA team that will review what happened and help handle exceptions. So this makes change management extremely easy on the customer team. And that was also another big issue with these existing tech vendors was the tech just wasn't there and the change management was extremely cumbersome. So that's why people didn't adopt it.
Can you tell us a little bit about like the origin story of Pallet in the sense of how did you get the team together? And you just raised $27 million a few months ago. You announced it. Can you tell us a little bit about like getting the team together and how the whole story from this pre-seed to Series B, breaking it down?
My goal was like there was two pillars for the company that I really wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure that we had a team that worked in the industry, that understood our customers in a high degree of excruciating detail. So part of our ops team, sales team were people that worked at Flexport, Siva, Uber Freight, and companies like that. That was like one important part to assemble. On the technology side, we just wanted to hire the best AI engineering talent that we could ever find. So we went for, hiring people from Scale AI, which Scale AI, Facebook, Google, Amazon, DoorDash, all of your leading tech companies on the technology side. And we made sure we had this really good balance of talent that had the right go-to-market DNA to go and acquire these customers, the right operations DNA to onboard and set these customers up for success, and the right set of technologists. And I think the balance of all three is what makes your company particularly dangerous, where like if you actually had someone in our company that could really dive deep into a freight brokerage or a freight forwarder's operations, they could talk to you about how Revenova works, how do you interface with Data Truck Stop, how does spot rate quoting work. We have all of that DNA in our company. And then we also have the technologists who know how to use these foundation models to build the capabilities to automate away your data entry process, your quoting process, your invoice audit process, and the various processes that you have. That was pretty much the critical way we thought about team assembly. And then in terms of like our funding rounds coming together, really what happened in kind of getting this last round together was General Catalyst kind of came to conviction that we assembled the best tech team in the industry. We had the right blend of commercial DNA. And when they talked to their customers, what they saw was that a lot of our customers were like, we were initially pretty hesitant to adopt this AI tooling. But Pallet really showed us something different. Where firstly, they understood our business in detail. They could walk us through our use cases. So we had confidence that they were a great partner in terms of industry knowledge. Secondly, they made change management extremely easy because of their managed service approach of like using AI plus humans to automate the workflow. And the second part was their pricing model made it an absolute no-brainer, right? Where we do outcome-based pricing. So for a lot of these companies, it's like, I like the idea of using AI, but I'm worried, what if it's just another line item on my expense sheet? With Pallet, we do outcome-based pricing where we're like, hey, if your cost of doing data entry in-house is $2, we'll charge you, let's say, 60 cents for it. And based on that, you will immediately actualize ROI because you're only paying for successful outcomes. And that also made it a no-brainer for a lot of customers to adopt this. So based on that early customer feedback, based on that team quality, I think GC saw a lot of similarities between what they saw in their first investment in Samsara. So that's what made them jump in.
How long did, just out of curiosity, how long did that fundraise take?
1 week.
Record time. Actually, no, record time probably would be less than that, like in the height of ZERP, but that's still really fast. That's awesome. Good for you guys. How big is the team now?
The team is 45 people.
Do I have it correct that you went through YC?
I did not go through YC.
Did not go through YC. Did you ever apply?
I did not, no.
Okay. Oh, so you didn't even apply. All right. We applied once with Freight Caviar. We didn't end up getting in, but so I was going to lead to...
to be clear, Shipper
Yeah,
Serum.
technically with Shipper Serum. Yeah. But one of the things that they force you to do is like, what's your one-line pitch? And I wanted to kind of I wanted to hear that from you, just so that I don't think we've actually given that to the audience yet since we've started talking, like what the one line for Pallet is.
We're in simplified work. We automate away all the tedious back office workflows you have through AI.
Fraud starts on the load boards, but it ends with gen logs. See why nearly all the top 50 brokerages now use gen logs to acquire new customers, source better carriers, and track down assets with a nationwide network of sensors. Book a demo today to see why others say it's like slinging freight on God mode. I think that overall a main topic, or like people that will be listening in right now, they're probably thinking like, I'm hearing of like a new AI company every week, like this AI company raised this amount, this raised this amount. I would like to hear from you if you could like kind of break down, like, first of all, how do you differentiate yourself with like, I would say this competitive landscape that continues to is getting more competitive, and how do you like see the future of AI, especially in logistics? I mean, where do you see the role of like a freight broker or a freight forwarder, and like how are their tasks going to change, or their day-to-day, how is that going to change in the near future?
So I think that to summarize the differences, I think it's three things, right? I think it's industry knowledge, I think it's technology, I think it's approach. So on the industry knowledge side, the first thing I'd kind of bring in foremost is like, let's say you're working with a freight forwarder and you need someone who understands how Incoterms work. You need someone who understands how customs classification works. You need someone who understands how to work with Descartes and CargoWise and all these different internal systems. 30% of Pallet comes from the industry. So within the first call, people already sense that they understand a good chunk of freight forwarding. So I don't have to re-educate them about freight forwarding. We can just focus on where we want to drive business impact. Another thing that allows us to keep doing this is we have a fun policy around hybrid work at Pallet. You have to either spend a week every single month if you work at this company on a customer site, one of our customer sites. And the reason we do that is because we would think that if you're don't have deep domain expertise, you can't build technology for this industry. And most of the AI companies are a bunch of technologists who just came out of Stanford or MIT or something that are building technology for this industry without that industry context. And that doesn't create the right solutions in terms of what you're building. The second part is technology. We're probably the best, or we are the best in the industry at handling unstructured documents, having a system that can navigate across your browser. And also what that leads to is that when it comes to all these back office operation tasks, like data entry and voice auditing, going to an Estes portal and retrieving a certain document, container track and trace, our technology is probably the single best in the industry at handling all of this. And the third thing is approach, right? Like a lot of these other companies are just pitching you a pure tech approach. But what we're seeing is we're deploying AI with human QA so that when you as a vendor are like, I'm scared about change management, I want to make sure that there's downside protection on the outcome. You give us your workflow, we're deploying our AI, we have the human QA process, so you have a human as a fallback mechanism. If something goes wrong and you're guaranteed some degree of reliability, you feel safe when you're deploying your product because you know that even if the technology goes off the rails in certain cases, there's a mechanism to catch any error. And I think those three things in parallel, having the best tech, especially for unstructured documents and navigating different browser interfaces and plugging in with your existing systems, having the industry knowledge, and having this human plus AI approach makes us much better than anyone else. And then the last thing I'd also say is that we're an omni-channel platform, right? We can handle voice, we can handle unstructured documents, we can handle navigating browser interfaces. A lot of these other AI vendors that exist out there are just point solutions who are really good at one problem. So if you're a freight broker or you're a freight forwarder or you're a carrier and you're like, I don't want to onboard so many different vendors to handle my entire like order life cycle and automate a good chunk of it away, Pallet ends up being a good default option because you're like, I just want one vendor who's a good long-term partner. And then the last thing is people also want to work with a vendor that's well capitalized, that's not going out of business. We have the biggest balance sheet out of anyone in the AI agents world. So that also helps.
Interesting. So, yeah, I guess that would be what it was. It was 27 million that you guys raised for this for this series.
Yeah.
Yeah, that probably does put you in the largest balance sheet for AI agents, at least in freight.
We could right now go two different directions in this conversation, and I'm kind of curious if you'd want to go down this direction, Sushanth. I want to learn more about you and like your, I guess, mindset in like building a company, because right now, I mean, you seem super young. I don't know how old you are.
I'm in my late 20s.
Okay, late 20s, and I mean, you've obviously been very successful so far in, building up a company, and you just raised a Series B. I'm curious if we could get to know you a little bit more on the personal side. Like, what drives you? Like why are you right now like in this position as you are that you are at the current moment? Can you like tell us a little bit more about yourself? Like, maybe your background, maybe your family upbringing, and why did you put yourself in this position? Because I feel like you have a lot of pressure on yourself right now, but you put yourself in this position, and I'm kind of curious if you could tell us more about that.
I think that the way I kind of have operated my entire life is always go to places that others are not looking and pick the path of most discomfort. And let me give you 3 examples that help shed color on this. So when I was growing up as a kid, it was in 5th grade, and I told my parents, I'm going to go to boarding school in India, and I found the school, you're going to send me there. And my parents thought I was crazy, but I thought that this was a way to kind of get away from comfort, challenge myself a lot. So I sent myself to a military boarding school in 6th grade. You had to get up at 4:30 a.m. every morning, go on a run, incredibly regimented day. Like you had to fold your clothes in a very specific way. It was like super intense, and you shared a room with 11 other guys. And part of the reason I did that was I felt like I knew what my path, if I stayed back in the US, was like. And I kind of wanted to try something different, push myself. And it was painful, but I think that experience made me grow, learn, built an insane amount of discipline that I kind of formed how I wanted to live my entire life. So then fast forward a couple of years later, I was in college. I was studying computer science at Columbia. And then I was deciding what to do after college. And most of my friends were like, we want to be engineers at Google, Facebook, and all these different companies. I rose my hand and I'm like, I'm going to try to do like a bit of a sales job. I'm going to be the first, I'm going to try to learn how sales works. So I went to Retool, where they were like a developer centric company. And I became one of the first go-to-market people there. And the reason I decided to kind of go into the world of sales and get client-facing exposure was I felt that if you want to build a big business, it's not important to just be technical, but you also have to know, how do you work with customers? How do you work with clients? And that was extremely uncomfortable again, because I was very technical. I had never done this stuff before, but I forced myself again to a place of discomfort. And again, a place that most of my peers wouldn't go. Most of my technical peers wouldn't want to do that. And in the last example, I'll say starting Pallet, I wanted to work on an industry that the rest of Silicon Valley was overlooking, which is how I decided to go to freight and logistics. And I also thought that this is going to be a tough business to build. It's going to be extremely difficult, but it's going to drive a ton of value. And if you look at those 3 examples, the common thread I'd say that defines my life is I've always embraced discomfort, which helps me a lot in this job. I've always looked at places that people don't want to go. And I've always, want to always keep challenging myself, which actually turns out to be really good ingredients for being a CEO, because every single day is uncomfortable. Every single quarter is something new. So I think that's what has really set me up well for this job.
And your grandparents, were they running, a manufacturer here in the States, or were they in India?
They were in India.
Okay. And how long were you working at their company, Al?
I was spending all of my summers there.
Seems like a good day camp based on where you've ended up for the most part.
Yeah.
I also, it's funny that you mentioned the fact that you went to boarding school or like military school, because I was just listening to another podcast that I think it was like Mark Andreessen was talking about this, where just like the military, like some countries require like people at 18 to go to the military even for like a year, and like that discipline that you build by being in the military seems to be like a pretty good precursor to like being a CEO for the most part, because you're like on the ground, both on the ground, but then you also have like you get used to like the kind of repetitive nature of some of the tasks that you may have to do, or grunt work per se, especially in the beginning. But did you feel like that really helped shape you into becoming a CEO, that whole military experience?
I think it shapes you on a couple of dimensions, right? You get being a CEO, you need a very high pain tolerance because things never go according to plan. So you build comfort with how do you deal with tough situations? How do you build emotional resilience so you just never give up? I think it really helped with that. I think the second thing is it ingrains with you is the value of repetition and persistence. And then the final thing I'd say is that it forces you to become like a creature of habit and like almost embrace the process, like, which I think a lot of CEOs, like, it's like it often takes a while for the outputs to start showing, right? There's a lot that has to go into place. And I think those are probably some of the values that I took away from being in that experience.
This podcast is also brought to you by Highway, the carrier identity platform that's revolutionizing how freight brokers fight fraud. Every day, new threats emerge, but with Highway's robust tools, you're always one step ahead. Last month alone, Highway stopped over 54,000 fraud attempts, solidifying its role as a trusted partner to over 600 3PLs. Highway stands as your shield against the threat of stolen identities, double brokering, data breaches, and more, ensuring that your operations are secure and your transactions are safe. So, if you want to focus on what you do best and leave the worries of fraud behind, it's time to partner with Highway. Visit highway.com now to book a demo. Highway. It all starts with carrier identity. Outside of work, like the discomfort that you obviously have, maybe that you're, I guess, seeking in some way at work, like how do you challenge yourself outside of, business? Like, do you have like a strict schedule you follow? Do you wake up at 4 a.m.? Do you have like crazy workouts? What do you do? Like,
Or do you
how does
still
your work day?
wake up at 4:30 a.m. from the military times?
No, I actually don't do that anymore. I've become a bit more of a night person lately, but I try to go to the gym every single day, oddly enough, at like 8:45 p.m. to a bit north of 10. That's like my thing that I kind of do. I have a pretty intense like fitness and like diet regime. Like I try not to eat anything that's largely unhealthy. I try to like do acupuncture every Friday. I try to cold plunge when I can. So I do all these things just to keep my wellness and like my body in sync. Because I think ultimately that sort of stuff helps you stay grounded day to day in your workplace. Like the healthier you are outside of work, the stronger you can kind of like balance everything inside work.
I'm listening right now to a podcast with Tim Ferriss, and he's talking to a guy who started like one championship, and it's like martial arts. I'm not sure if you're into martial arts at all.
I got into boxing, but not martial arts. Yeah.
Okay. He also like talks a lot about like seeking discomfort.
So speaking of discomfort, Sushanth, there's definitely a lot of people who are looking at the progression of the technology in any space, but we can narrow it down to freight. And when they look at what's coming, and they kind of see a lot of these demos, and maybe some people are still denying that it'll be automating their jobs away anytime soon. But then there's also people that who are, at least I would say, like a little bit technologically savvy. They realize that a lot of what we're seeing is changing at a rate way faster than we've ever seen it before. And I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on more so generically what the future of brokerage is kind of and freight in general is going to look like, but B, what do you think about the role of the current jobs today, and if they get removed or replaced in some way, shape, or form, do you think that there will be new jobs that get formed as well?
I think the answer is that probably the nature of how everyone's doing their job is going to dynamically change, right? I think that I think we've seen all these technology revolutions that have happened in the past, like the cloud revolution, the .com, what happened with the .com movement. And every time there was this prediction that jobs are all going to go away. But I think the real answer is probably what's going to happen is that this is a very good productivity accelerant, right? Now your sales rep can go from managing let's say 100 quotes to 1,000, 1,500 quotes per day. That theoretically the volume that they can do of less mundane day-to-day tasks and spend their time more on the contract negotiations, the rate negotiations, the interventions, just frees up their time to be more productive and effective. I think that's, first of all, that's going to happen. Secondly, there are probably a set of jobs that are going to be in some cases displaced. I think that's natural, but I do think there's also a bit of there's going to probably be a bit of some net new job creation that comes out of these agents where you're going to have folks that have to figure out, how do you manage the agent? How do you creatively think about how do you navigate handling the quotes? How do you navigate all the incoming phone calls? How do you navigate how do you handle when you want human intervention there? How do you not? There's going to be jobs that involve a lot more decision making and creativity that kind of come into play. So I think that's for sure there. I think the industry as a whole largely is going to you're going to see just a lot of improvements across the board with the fundamental net margin, the profitability structure of these businesses is going to get a lot more attractive. I think a lot of folks' time is going to be spent, frankly, on stuff that's going to be more business value driving, right? Like sales, client-facing relationships, actually, managing your fleet of drivers, managing your network of warehouses, more time spent on physical assets, less time spent on back office operations. And I think these structures as a whole should probably show over time that, first of all, we're seeing drastic improvements in profitability. Secondly, we're seeing that we can spend time on more revenue-facing activities, so that should affect our top line. I think holistically, the entire industry is going to really get amplified. I think the one thing I would say, though, is that people who don't embrace this technology have a risk of being left behind. Let's say that you're freight broker A and you're freight broker B. Freight broker A implements AI to automate customer support and quoting. Freight broker B doesn't. So when a customer reaches out to freight broker A and they're like, "Where's my shipment?" Instant respond. They ask for a price to get an instant bid. But when they reach out to freight broker B, who might be competing for the same shipments, they're like, "Hey, I'm not getting fast bid responses. My customer experience isn't as strong here. I'm probably going to work with freight broker A." So the one thing I will say is that businesses that don't embrace this technology change might be left a bit behind, frankly.
If every brokerage has the same set of instant features, right? Quoting, tracking, whatever, what do they start to compete on when everybody starts to kind of have a similar offering? What do you ever think about that, or do you think about it in a different way? What brokerages will start to compete on, let's say 10 years from now, 5 years from now? How will they start to differentiate themselves?
Look, at the end of the day, there's an element of even though technology comes and goes, still the basics hold true, right? Your relationships, how well how well you have relationships with your shippers and your carriers, and how reliable of partners you are. That stuff just matters still. Still your historical stuff, are you making the right decisions on, even though you're using agents, you still need to give the agent some logic on carrier selection, how you're deciding who to pick, how do you assess different metrics, and everyone has their agents kind of configured in different ways. So the way they define the logic on how they want their agents to run still matters. And that stuff will help you determine, are you hitting your on-time delivery rate metrics? Are you not hitting your on-time delivery rate metrics? Are you not handling the packages and the movement the right way? And then I think that stuff will still matter. So I think in some ways that stuff is never going away. The relationships, are you hitting your KPIs or not? I think what will definitely change, though, is that if you look back at what Amazon and DoorDash have done to us, they've kind of really pushed our expectations as customers, right? Where now we expect same-day deliveries. I think what's going to happen in the future is that customer expectations will be insanely high. They're going to have a lot more demands of their broker. They're going to expect, to your point, fast response times, fast quote times, really optimal carrier selection. And then I think a bleeding effect of that is probably price. There will be some downward pressure on pricing. And I think customer expectations will drastically evolve over the next 10 years. So the brokers that don't navigate that transition will frankly go out of business. And then there might be some new set of players who are more tech forward, embrace the stuff that will succeed in that world. Like this has happened in every technology cycle. And I think this one's kind of similar where some things do change, like the expectations of the customer have, but some things don't change.
What do you think won't be, okay, so you think that the relationships, the importance of relationships effectively will be the one thing for the most part that won't change? Anything else?
Yeah, and then also like just like thinking through how you define your business logics, right? Like how do you can have an agent, but like are you the type of company that's always going to pick the lowest price in the carriers that you broker to? Or are you the type of company that has that thinks through quality in the right way? Like all those details on how you orchestrate and run your business also does matter. Like the people you hire who are managing these agents, are they high quality? Or are they not high quality? Like all those like fundamental company principles will still matter 10 years from now as they do now.
So is Pallet mainly being used by brokers, or is this something that you anticipate trucking companies using as well, carriers?
We have a wide collection across carriers, brokers, forwarders, and shippers. I'd say that
sides of the aisle. Okay.
all kinds of companies can utilize our platform. Yeah.
Are certain groups seeing more benefits, like reaping more benefits than others at the moment? My guess would be is that it would probably be brokers would probably be seeing the biggest gains, but then I don't know. Maybe as I start to think about it more, maybe it's shippers too. Potentially.
I think every constituent sees a high degree of value, but I would say that people who have more back office complexity tend to see a lot more value, like because of scale and because of like maybe how much work goes into processing a shipment, right? So if you look at which segments tend to have the highest back office complexity, it's like intermodal, it's LTL and final mile, it's freight brokerages, it's freight forwarding, it's shippers that have like their own distribution and warehousing centers. Like those type of customers tend to have the most back office complexity.
How many have you talked to with? I'm assuming you've talked with a lot of people that have been probably in the industry for quite some time. Have you found yourself to be in disagreement with any of these kind of long-standing opinions that some of these very experienced very experienced industry experts might have? For example, have you found yourself to be in conflict with some of the advice that has ever been given to you?
I think the one that I disagree with the most frequently is that, like, we can wait, we can see others adopt this technology and we'll be fine. I'm like, no, like if you don't adopt this today, like imagine your competitor adopted it and they're giving instant quotes and instant support. You're suffering now, you're getting less revenue. Secondly, they've made the jump to go faster on the learning curve where they're going to make some mistakes for the first 3 months, but 3 to 6 months out from now, they're fully AI native. And then now you decide to go and make the jump. And then you're going to go through your own experimentation process. And then you're a year behind. And that's like not a great place to be because now they're more tech forward than you. They've adopted more use cases than you. They've been able to kind of see the pricing benefits, the customer support benefits, and so on. So yeah, I think the main thing that I disagree with some customers on is like, you need to be embracing new technology trends faster, right? Like the longer and longer you wait, if you're the last person to kind of embrace the change, you might frankly be left behind.
Now, is there on the shipper side, this is from a prior experience that I've had, do you have to get insurance for any of the software that you sell to like enterprise shippers in the event that like the changes that take place may affect their business? Have you ever heard of that? Or is that something that you have to do with?
Our customers run thorough security audits, make sure we're all certified, and they run like detailed checks on like all of our docs to make sure that like, we're actually someone who's like enterprise ready. So we experienced that. Can't say we've experienced the specific insurance part you've covered, but there are a lot of checks that these enterprises undergo through us on the security side to make sure that we're ready and SOC 2 compliant and ready to like work with them.
Out of everything that you've built so far at Pallet, which part is there a specific piece that always pulls you in and where you'd like to spend your focus time?
I think the area that I'm most interested in is like the Pallet system gets smarter and smarter and smarter over time. So we apply reinforcement learning with human feedback to basically amplify how our system learns over time, right? So what this means is like if you're a customer of Pallet, a year from now, Pallet is processing your quotes with even higher accuracy at lower prices, and moving at those tasks faster. So the area that I'm most excited about is how do we kind of scale that reinforcement learning data pipeline and like just really make the system better and better and better over time, so that if you're buying Pallet today, 2 months from now, you're like, it's better. 3 months from now, Copilot's better. And you keep experiencing these gains as a customer. And the more we can kind of lean on that as an advantage, it becomes a no-brainer of like, it's kind of wonderful because you as a customer, what do you care about? The price of the product, the reliability and accuracy of the product, the time it takes to complete the task you have assigned. And if we keep improving on those three metrics, there's no reason why we won't be the best product in the market.
So for the audience, just to recap, like what reinforcement learning effectively actually is, it's a way to evaluate the prediction and basically say, apply like a reward or a penalty. And as you continue to apply these rewards or penalties, that's basically how you train this AI to get towards the desired outcome that you effectively want. Would you change that definition in any way?
Yeah, I think they're right. It's kind of like in many ways, like if you were teaching a kid, and then like you asked them what is 1 + 3, and they said 4. You're like, no, it's not 4. It should actually be 5. And then here's why it's 5. And then the next time you keep teaching the kid over and over time on like addition, like why they're wrong and why they're right, and they have a reward function for being right, they'll be more right over time. The same thing holds true with these AI agents, where like you have to apply some degree of feedback every time they're wrong and right, and they're going to kind of achieve better and better outcomes over time.
Anything that maybe people who have been paying attention to the AI agent space in Freight, anything that you'd want them to know that maybe would be different about Pallet AI that they may not have already heard of, or seen in some way, shape, or form? Maybe companies have done it and have offered this certain. I've heard of these certain individual features that you guys offer before, but it does seem like you guys are packaging it into a very nice product that your customers are really liking. So what would you say? Is there anything that you would want people to know that maybe isn't as well known about Pallet?
I mean, I think the main thing that I'd say is that like with Pallet, we make the change management like. The main thing is like, I'm sure that if you're watching this, you're already convinced that like this technology is going to help me. I'm just super busy right now. Like, how do I make the world of magic all real? Right? It's like I clearly agree that this is going to help me, but I'm so busy that like, where do I find the time? My one thing I'd say is that we make these onboardings pretty simple. We give you a dedicated a deployment strategist, a dedicated project manager, a dedicated account manager working on your account. You could just give us a video of the workflow you want automated, and then we can use that video, generate an SOP, send that SOP back to you. You tell us it looks good. And then with our ability to we can also configure all the integrations on our side, and you will have a minimal amount of heavy lifting to get the process started. And you can only start with maybe 10% of a volume, one location to get comfortable. But we totally understand that the most intimidating part of this is change management. And what we've done is a ton of effort to make that a no-brainer for you to kind of get started. We have outcome-based pricing. We can help with SOP generation. We can handle a lot of the systems integration on our end. And that'll make it very quick for you to get started. So that's one thing. The second thing I'd say is that we always push our customer. Let's start with one use case. Let's start with a small percentage of volume so that you have conviction that this is working, versus trying to kind of get you to boil the ocean and try to try a lot of different stuff. We actually encourage that start small and then go big. So those are two things I'll just leave our customers with, is that our ultimate goal is make change management for you super easy so you can see the benefits fast.
Awesome. And last question I have here is what's the size of your biggest customer, and what's the size of your what's the size range from the biggest customer in terms of their revenue, without naming who they are, to the smallest that you have?
The smallest customer does about 4 million of revenue, and our biggest customer does over $15 billion of revenue.
Awesome. Well, Sushanth, this was very interesting to learn about Pallet, to learn a little bit about you as well. Would love to maybe meet in person someday. Are you based in SF, I'm assuming?
I'm based in San Francisco.
Cool. When we make our way out there, we'll reach out to you and we can get together. But Anything else? How do people reach out to Pallet, get in contact, try it out?
If you want to go check out Pallet, go to pallet.com. You can request for an appointment with anyone else. And if you want to reach out directly to me, reach out to me at sushanth@pallet.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as Sushanth Raman. I'm on Twitter as Sushanth Raman. You can find me on any of those different channels. One last thing I'll just leave you all with is like the key difference between us and Pallet is that we're not a bunch of technologists that just think that AI is going to change the world. We understand that the huge part that makes all this happen is understanding your operations extremely well. I think we have the culture here of like, make sure we can really show the customers we understand their workflow, whether it's container tracking, whether it's spot rate quoting, whether it's uploading your rate confirmation sheets into your TMS, whatever the workflow is, we'll walk through. We have a base understanding of it. We walk through an excruciating amount of detail. Then only do we get into the tech. And this is the same mindset where we force our team to go and spend a week every single month on the client side because we want our customers to see that we just really, really understand them extremely well. There is no great technology if you don't understand your customers well.
Great way to leave it off, I think. And Sushanth, thank you so much for coming on. Wish you the best. And all the best. All right.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Take care.